And, there's a role. There's always been a role for Bible scholars. You had Peter the fisherman. He loved the Lord. We also had Paul the Bible scholar who wrote Romans, right? Not the same thing. Both incredible men of God. So there's a role for Bible scholarship, as we see in Paul, as we see with Isaiah, for example, right? But one of the things that we have gone away from, one of the ways the church evolved, where in the New Testament, well, let me go with this. In the Old Testament, with Moses, when they went up to the mountain of God, God said, I want you all to be priests. They said, no, we don't want to be priests. Moses, you be the priest. So then they had a separate priestly class of Levites and the regular people. So the clergy and the regular people. In the New Testament, we went back to the model that God wanted to do with Moses, that they're all priests. So in the New Testament, it's called the priesthood of all believers. Then as we went into the Middle Ages, we separated that again, where the clergy were extra special. And you would have to tell, instead of going with your sins to God, you have to tell me your sins and I would forgive you, etc., right? And we read the Bible for you. You don't read the Bible. And one of the things that we protested was you don't need the pastor to tell you what the Bible says. You read it for yourself, like Paul said, right, with the Bereans. Like Paul was glad, don't believe anything I say, check it out for yourself, right? And that's what the New Testament does teach. One of the ways the church evolved is to separate those, right? And so I know, there's stuff that I've researched. I go into, these big problems like I'm going to do right now. But overall, although there's value to having a professionally trained Bible scholar as your pastor, your guest speaker, I never want to create the impression that you can't understand the Bible for yourself, right? And one of the key elements that we protested from the church that had strayed from the Bible teachings is that we are all priests. And check the Bible out for yourself. And what I would say is this. Sometimes, like when I was in university, professors would say something like, that's not in the Bible. And then I check out the Bible like, that's in there. Never saw that. That's what I'm hoping to do when you check it out yourself, right? And sometimes some professors try to tell me stuff. Like one professor tried to tell me how the Joshua sun setting still wasn't really a miracle. It was an optical illusion. And I was like, that's not in the Bible. Nope, that's not in the Bible. I'm not sure why he's working here and getting paid for this. But anyways, so, anything that I say, check it out for yourself. Don't be intimidated. And what I'm hoping I can do, like my favorite professors, where you go, that's not in the Bible. You check it out for yourself. Oh, that is. It's a lot easier to see things if it's kind of explained to you a little bit first, right? But I'm a protester. I'm a Protestant. I believe in the priesthood of all believers. There's value to knowing Greek and Hebrew, but it's not a necessity. If you read your English Bible in context, you read broadly. Don't just take one or two verses. You can end up at any weird place with one or two verses. Anything important is said in a lot of verses. Okay? Like salvation, all over the Bible. Okay? Any important topic is covered in the Bible. Never make a big idea on a small verse. Any big idea needs to have multiple verses in context so you can understand what it is, okay? So please, I love the research. I love the theology I do. I never want people to feel intimidated, like you can't understand anything unless I'm here. I'm here to help guide and bring you back to the Bible, like, hey, if this thing's actually true, I want to read it. That's how I feel. When I saw that evidence for Jesus or the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm like, it inspires me to read the Bible more, okay? Let's skip Kahoot. 239. Here's a bunch of questions people have. Most people believe what their parents taught them. So saying, well, God doesn't exist, you just believe what your parents taught you doesn't mean anything. The Big Bang supports belief in God, not chance. Remember, Fred Hoyle? Big Bang is not on Team Atheism. Big Bang is on Team Jesus. Okay? Big Bang is basically the universe had a beginning. All right? And, of course, how can everything come from nothing? You can't get life from non-life. I'm extremely skeptical. Jesus is not a legend. He's the best documented person in ancient history. And I don't want to have the next sentence. And let's see if the Bible promotes injustice and oppression. Here, let's do a little review here. This is the talk I didn't have time. But basically, would the world be better without God? Well, if there is no God, there's no personhood. You're just a smart animal. So why not rape, kill, and enslave people. Animals do it. Animals have slaves, slaver ants. Those cute mallard ducks rape each other and kill each other. And of course, male lions will kill the baby cubs to make new if the male lion comes into a new pride and the cubs that aren't his, he'll kill them off so the female lionesses can make babies faster with him. Isn't nature beautiful? All right. Do we want humans doing that? No. We don't put the lion in jail. He's just being an animal. If there is no God, you're just an animal with an extra large sized brain. You're not a person. You don't have real choice. Everything is just a chemical reaction, like a really complicated domino game that starts at the Big Bang. Which, of course, Big Bang can't happen without God anyhow. But atheists say this. Sam Harris, these famous atheists, if there is no God, it's all just chemical reactions in physics, which means every choice you think you have is a really complicated domino. So you don't have choice. So how do you punish criminals? You can't put someone in jail. It's not their fault. Never had a choice. There's no real value, right? Everything's going to die in the cold heat death of the universe in a few billion years. One of the things that I think is really important is there's two options, right? There's two options for the universe. Either everything is random luck or God made it on purpose. There's two options with your brain. Your brain either evolves by random chance to help you not die. So if there's only biology, no God, your body, including your brain, evolved to just help you live long enough to make babies who live long enough to make babies, right? You're just a DNA machine, okay? That is not, the critical element there is not truth, it's biological reproduction. It's making babies, not truth. If there is a God, he is truth. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And he created your brain to discern what is true and not true. So, it is a contradiction to say that my brain evolved by random chance to make more babies, not to discern what is true, but I'm going to use that randomly evolved brain to decide God isn't true. Did you follow? If you evolved by random chance, your brain isn't reliable. It's evolved to make more babies, not to discern truth. So then it's contradictory. It's called the evolutionary argument against naturalism, actually by a Catholic philosopher, Alvin Plantinga, one of the greatest philosophers of our time. And it is, if evolution is true, atheism can't be true. Did you follow me? Because then your brain is not designed to discern truth, it's designed to make babies. All right, so there is no truth if God doesn't exist, or at least you can't discern it, because your brain is the product of random chance and simply has been selected to make more babies. There's obviously no purpose, right? And there's no real right and wrong, right? So don't put anyone in jail. Like, how dare you oppress those criminals and limit their freedom? If there is a God, you're a person in God's image. God gives you choice. Your Creator gives you choice. You have value as God's child, right? Your value is bestowed upon you regardless of what you do. You have value because of your identity. As a child of God, God is the definition of truth. God is the definition of love, and the purpose, according to Jesus, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And by the way, Jesus is quoting Moses from Leviticus 19:17-18 and Deuteronomy chapter 6. All right, so the greatest commandments there is the purpose of life is to love God, love people. God defines what is right and wrong. So we couldn't put the Nazis in jail after World War II because right and wrong, in a practical sense, is defined by the government. There's things that are illegal in Canada aren't illegal here and vice versa, right? And you go to jail in one country based on their laws versus another country. Well, with the Nazis, we went to put them in jail, and they said, I was following orders, right? You're imposing American law on Germany. You can't. American laws for Americans, German laws for Germany, and the German law said, I can do this. I can kill the Jews off or whatever. And the lawyers had to appeal to a higher source because you can't put Nazis in jail if Nazis are following Nazi laws. committing genocide, right? Is genocide wrong if the law says it's okay? If it's wrong, why is it wrong? Right? What's your highest authority? You need something above human government, and that's where God defines right and wrong. Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905-1980, a famous atheist philosopher. I just love these quotes by atheists. It's too easy sometimes, but life has no meaning the moment you lose the illusion of being eternal. I'm always curious, like, why would you promote this idea? Like, if you really believe this, just leave it alone. Are you trying to make more people depressed? Life has no meaning the moment you lose the illusion of being. Then, of course, the idea is you have to invent your own meaning, right? Another really important verse, which we're going to be referring back to today with justice, right, is there has to be meaning for justice. To have injustice, you have to have justice. And this is one of the most important verses in the Bible. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them male and female. Why is it wrong to oppress women? Because they're equally in the image as men are. Image of God. Different, but equal. I know that's been misquoted before, but men and women are equal. Women deserve equal rights to men. Amen? And Christians have been at the forefront of women's rights, by the way. Women's suffrage, that was a conservative Christian movement, by the way. Why is slavery wrong? Why shouldn't the Egyptians enslave the Israelites? Why shouldn't the Aztecs enslave the poor farmers? Right? Because all of them are equally in the image of God. Whether you're German, whether you are First Nations, whether you are Japanese or Korean or African descent, Kenyan or South African, wherever, we're all equally in the image of God. When that gets violated, we call it unjust. So here's where we're getting to the problem. Bad things happen, so a good God cannot exist. Well, this is one of the main reasons people don't believe in God, including one of my favorite scientists, who's actually softened, but he had an older quote, said, I don't believe in God because how can a good God allow bad things to happen? Well, that doesn't come from science. That idea, again, like a lot of ideas that have been very damaging spiritually, it comes from ancient Greek philosophy. Now, many ancient Greek philosophers were brilliant, so I want to appreciate, there were some really brilliant ideas Greek philosophers came up with. And, of course, democracy has roots in Greek philosophy. But this is one of them I don't agree with. Epicurus, from about 300 years before Jesus, believed in the Greek gods, plural, small g with an S, believed that gods were in existence, but they were immortal, blissful beings who were indifferent to humans. Didn't care about humans. And part of the way he justified his view, is that, the presence of evil indicates the gods are not non-existent, but rather the gods are indifferent to humans, and they ignore humans, and humans should ignore the gods. The gods either wish to take away evil, but they're unable, so why sacrifice to them, right? They can't help you anyhow. They're able, but unwilling, well, why worship them, right? They're neither willing nor able, or they're both willing and able. Now, this really got popularized. I mean, this was around for history, but in 1779, David Hume, in a Christian culture of Northern Europe, right? He's a Scotsman. He took this and he said, if God is all-powerful, he should be able to prevent evil. If God is all good, he should want to prevent evil. Yet evil and suffering clearly exist. So whenever you see something like this, you got to read between the lines. Look for the assumption. Where's the huge, capital H, huge assumption here? Let me step out of the way. Where's the assumption? Sorry? Okay, good. There's a standard to judge against. If God is all-powerful, yes. So, Christians believe God is all-powerful and all-good. Here's the issue. If God doesn't exist, evil doesn't exist. Evil isn't a science word. Evil is a theology word, right? Is it evil when nature does nature stuff? Or is that just nature, right? Evil is not a science word. Nature is just nature. Biology is just biology. If there is no God, there is no standard. If there is no standard, there is no evil, right? You can't have injustice unless there is justice. You don't know what a crooked line is unless there's a straight line to contrast it. You with me? So this is the Epicurean paradox, right? Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he's impotent, meaning lacking power. Okay? Potent is the word for power. Is he able but not willing? Then he's malevolent, meaning evil. Is he both able and willing? Then whence comes evil? Okay? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Okay? And again, here is the big thing, is evil. How do you have evil? Well, in the Bible, it defines God as what? What single word is God defined as? Okay, he's called holy, yes. Love, right? Again, Jesus said the whole purpose, all the law and the prophets hang on this, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Love is our purpose, and God's purpose is God is love. Can you have love without choice? No. Could God make a universe without choice? Yes, and if you can do anything, you can make a universe without choice, or without choice, but then you can't have love. It's like, can God make a square circle? Well, no. There's a square and there's a circle, okay? There's love and choice over here. There's no choice here, no love, no possibility of evil. To have a universe in which love is possible, it has to have choice. If you have choice, there has to be not the presence of evil, but the possibility of evil. It's a logical necessity, okay? So you have the possibility of evil, then of course, as we've seen, not with Adam and Eve, with Lucifer, original sin is in heaven, Lucifer sinned first, we have in a perfect world, we see evil start. And of course, as Revelation says, there was war where? In heaven is where war started. Okay? In heaven, if God is love, you have to have choice. If you have choice, you have to have the possibility of evil. So then, if God is love, by definition, he'll want to make a universe in which love is possible. And then there's going to be choice, and as we believe as Christians, right? Those of us who are Christian, I don't assume everyone in the room is a Christian, but Christians believe that love necessitates choice, and choice necessitates the possibility of evil, and we have chosen evil. We continue to. Look around the world right now. Agree or disagree, most human suffering is either caused by humans or preventable by humans. We have food for every human on the planet. We throw it out. And then we blame God for people starving. That's not God's fault. That's our fault. Now, I'm not saying there's an easy solution to it. There isn't. There's a lot of people who have been working hard on that for many, many years. But that is humans. Famine is a human economic political problem, not a food problem. Okay? We grow food for everyone. War. Do we need war? No. Now, we need an army to prevent war, right? You want the good guys to have the bigger guns, right? Let's just agree on that. We want the good guys to have the bigger guns or the bad guys take over. Hitler would not have started World War II if he knew he was going to get whooped, right? He thought he could win, and he had the best army in history, right? 4 million soldiers marched into Russia. Largest land invasion ever. Ukraine and Russia is a big war. Nothing compared to World War II, right? So evil is a theological word, and it's necessary for the possibility of evil because of choice. Another problem with injustice: proceed with caution when commandeering other people's pain to build your case against God. My friend attended a university class, and again, I want to be sensitive. There's a lot of great public university classes out there. There's Christian professors in public universities, etc. I have some of these stories. I believe in Christian education. I'm a big fan of it. I don't know if I'd be a Christian if I would have gone to public university. I wasn't ready to take on the PhD questions with high school answers. That's not a fair fight. Now I've lectured at universities. I am not scared. Like, bring on the professors, right? I will take you all on if you want to debate me. But proceed with caution, commandeering other people's pain. So my friend went to a university in Wisconsin. She took a class on the Holocaust, World War II. You know, of course, one of the main symbols of evil in our modern society is the murder of millions, not just of Jews, but like everyone who didn't fit the Aryan ideal, which, of course, ironically, Hitler didn't either. He was not blonde-haired, didn't have blue eyes. But at the end of this class, with all these young adults, the professor, brilliant man, PhD, you know, in a position of authority, and there's, you know, these young, easily influenced young adults there, right? Not in a position of authority. He gets up in front of the class and he declares, like, you know, when I do a wedding, I say, you know, by the power invested in me, I declare you husband and wife. He's doing that, declaring, in light of the Holocaust, you cannot believe in a loving God. Who caused the Holocaust? Humans. Humans caused the Holocaust, right? Number two, are there people who do know about the Holocaust and still believe in a loving God? Yes. Are there people who suffered in the Holocaust and still believe in a loving God? If you want to say science, let's play science. Sociology. Are there people who believe in a loving God that were in the Holocaust? Then your statement is a lie. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD. That's garbage. It's arrogant and it's wrong. Say you can say you should not, in light of the Holocaust, you should not believe in a loving God. That's your viewpoint. Okay? You're entitled to your own viewpoint. But to declare you can't is rubbish. It's unscientific. It's untrue. I recently heard a atheist podcast, and you know, this lady on there. I forget, it was American Atheist or something. This is this podcast I was listening to. I like to hear both sides, and it was a similar thing. Is like, you can't walk through a children's hospital and come out the other end and still believe in a loving God. And I was like, I've been to a children's hospital, and I still believe in a loving God. A lot of parents in there are praying to a loving God for their kids to come out. When we're praying today for Rachel, right? And we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm praying and I'm hoping she comes out okay. But it's just not accurate. And here's the really arrogant part is you're sitting in a middle-class, comfortable town in Wisconsin, right? You're not suffering anything, right? In Rwanda, had a similar genocide, and there was a mother there who her family was murdered. To save her own life, she had to take her family member's blood and put their blood on her body and then play dead from her own family. And she said the opposite. She survived genocide and said, you must believe in a loving God to make it through. When I shared this in Ontario, in Oshawa, Ontario, I shared the story, and this lady came up afterwards. And she's from Rwanda. She survived the Rwandan Holocaust. She still had machete scars on her arm, and she had a big, I can't really see it in this picture, she had a big scar on her head where they hit her on the head with a machete. Her family got murdered in the genocide. Her uncle, you know, her siblings, etc. After the Rwandan genocide. Right? The few members of the family that survived, you know, they were hiding in the attic or something like that. The few members that survived, they were at home. It was her mother or grandmother. They were at home, and there's a knock on the door. And they go to open the door, and there's this man at the door. And he's destitute, like he's in rough shape, etc. And you just tell this guy is messed up emotionally. And he says, that was me that came to your farm and killed your family. Please forgive me. Now, this lady was a Christian, so she brings him in and feeds him. Later on, he visited Canada, where this lady is. And know what they call him? The person that murdered her uncle, they call the murderer uncle. It's not a genetic thing. In that culture, it's not a genetic thing. It's a term of endearment, like a really close family friend. They call the person that murdered their uncle, they call him uncle. If there is no God, where do you get forgiveness like that from? Is the world better without God? What do you do with genocide? How do you pay that back? How do you reconcile the Hutus and the Tutsis? How do you reconcile the Jews and the Germans after World War II? The best model of reconciliation we have is the love of Jesus as taught in the New Testament. Nothing's even close. And if you think you can get rid of that and make the world better, you are dead wrong, and you're also proven wrong by science. Sociology destroys those assumptions. Don't pick and choose your science. Okay? The truth is, extraordinary suffering often leads to extraordinary confidence in God. You know, when I was in Michigan, I was in the low-income area, had one of the highest murder rates in the U.S. per capita some years. You know, the guy who fixed my floor, I bought a fixer-upper house, and the guy who sanded my floor got beat to death outside my church Sunday afternoon. Rough town. Basically no atheists. There's a river where Benton Harbor is. On the other side of the river, St. Joseph. It's like the Aspen of Michigan, right? Very wealthy, like one murder every 30 years. You know where the atheists are? They're in St. Joe. They're not in Benton Harbor, right? In Haiti, the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, the atheism rate is extremely low in Haiti. You know where it's higher? In Canada and the U.S. The richest, most blessed countries who got their wealth from following, especially British common law, is a very good predictor of the wealth of a nation. We got our wealth from following rules about justice in here, and with those blessings, we get so rich and comfortable, then we blame God for the evils we don't even suffer. How does that make any sense? Right? Corrie ten Boom, who had her family murdered in the Holocaust, she went to the concentration camp herself, said, I needed my belief in a good God to help me through. One of the curses she had to endure when she went to the concentration camp is they had a whole bunch of lice in their area. And they would meet for Bible study there. Her and the other one would meet for Bible study, and the lice, they prayed about the lice, they just couldn't get rid of the lice. You know what was beautiful about the lice? The German soldiers didn't want to touch the ladies. So those ladies never got molested. Thank God for unanswered prayer. Thank God for the lice. And those kind of things that she saw, the miracles she saw there, right? I needed my belief in a good God to help me through. Extraordinary suffering is not evidence against God, but rather often it leads to extraordinary belief in God, right? That I needed my belief in God to help me through. Number one. And number two, it shows you why it's wrong, right? Why are we offended when we see suffering? If we're just smart chimps, that's natural. Why are we offended when a baby dies from cancer? Right? If there is no God, that's just normal. That's just natural. But if there is a God, the God of the Bible, that's not right. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It's not the way we were designed. We were designed to live forever, and we see injustice. We see horrible, painful death, especially of innocent children. We go, that is wrong. Why? Because Jesus says so. That's not the way it's supposed to be. So when you get offended by pain and suffering, so that being evidence that God doesn't exist is actually evidence that you are in the image of God. The things that break God's heart also break yours. Because there is no God, why is it wrong for children to get cancer? Number two, how's it going to help you if your child dies from cancer? Will you heal better if you have strong faith or you have no faith at all? Faith helps you heal. We talked about that. Strong faith is as powerful as prescription strength medication for anxiety and stress. Right? You know why hospitals hire people like me? Right? Again, you have a hospital, you hire nurses and doctors, right? And the people cost money. You don't just want to waste money hiring some clergy, right? Some chaplain. Go to the church. You go to the church, we have a hospital here. We're based on science. You know why they hire chaplains? Because people who are prayed for have a better chance of not dying. They can still die. They have a better chance of not dying. Number two, they will get out of the hospital faster. Number three, they're more polite to the nurses in the process. So if you are an atheist and you run a hospital, if you believe in science, you want to hire clergy to work there, hospital chaplains, because they will make you more money. People have a better chance of surviving, will will heal faster. So people who are better chance of dying versus not dying. If you heal, people who are prayed for heal faster. People who are not prayed for, and you have a better attitude in the process. Is the world better without God? No. There's no rational argument against the existence of God or involvement of the God of Jesus based on injustice of the world, because Jesus himself suffered injustice. My God, why have you forsaken me? We have never made this argument that God's existence is based on a world where bad things never happen to good people. The truth is, injustice does not call into question the justice of God, but calls into question the justice of God, not the existence of God. So why do we think if God exists, he should be a God of love? Right? He should be a God of justice. You know, sometimes people say, oh, the Bible, we stole our ideas from other, pagan myths, like, the Gilgamesh epic, right? The other flood story, kind of like Noah's flood from ancient Babylon. Well, in that version of the flood, the gods aren't nice. The big, powerful God wants to kill the humans. Humans making too much noise. He's tired of it. He wants to kill them without telling them. A smaller God hears about it, goes around and talks to the Noah guy, different name, of course, but, the guy with the boat, tells him, hey, you got to build a boat. This other guy's going to flood the whole world and kill you all off. So that guy makes a boat, puts the animals on, it survives, right? The big God hears, he's like, hey, why are there still humans here? They're still annoying me with noise. What happened? He finds out the little God warned the humans, and he punishes the little God. Is that a nice God? Is that a God of justice? Why do we think if God exists, he has to be a nice God? Right? Ancient Greece did not have that assumption. Right? In Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, right? The Bible of the Greeks, as it were. The gods aren't nice. They're flippant. They're all over the place. They're immoral. They're seductive. They're tricksters. They're all over the place. I mean, one of the things they do with Hector and Achilles. Achilles is the best warrior. Hector is the best guy. Right? He's the nice guy. Achilles is the more skilled warrior. And as they're fighting, one of the goddesses is helping out Hector, the goddess Athena, tricks Hector. She passes him spears, as in he's throwing spears at Achilles, and then she randomly stops and starts helping out Achilles instead. So now Achilles is like he has a machine gun. He has unlimited spear supply. And Hector realizes he's defeated, not because he wasn't a skilled warrior, because the goddess just betrayed him and went to the other side for no good reason. So then Achilles wins, right? That is not a God of justice. That's just flippant and random. Right? Why do we assume if there is a God, God must be good and just? Who told us that? You know who told us that? Jesus. Jesus told us that. That God, if God exists, right, he is a God of love. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This version comes from Jesus. Now, here's the ironic part. If anybody had a reason to stop believing in God because of injustice, it wasn't you or me. The person who had the best reason to stop believing in God was Jesus. Right? He had the worst injustice. If anybody had a reason to stop believing in a God of love and justice, it was Jesus. See, bad things happen, so a good God cannot exist. Does not come from ancient mythology. It's not in the Bible. It's a modern Western assumption. We've got wealthy and comfortable. Then we've complained about suffering, that other people suffer more than we do. There's a modern Western assumption. It's a minority assumption. The truth is, most people are religious. When you hear, oh, Norway, look how awesome Norway is doing. Well, that's because they're all atheists. Just Google that. That is not true. Norway's 85% religious. Switzerland, 76. Australia, 65. Ireland, 85. Germany, 64. Right? All the best countries in the world that you'd want to move to, almost all of them, I'll say almost all of them, are majority Christian. I know I've had friends who are atheists. They'll say, oh, look at this amazing country, Iceland. Look, they put all these evil bankers away. Oh, so good to not be Christian. I was like, Google. Yeah, they're still majority Christian, by the way. You know, and of course, some of the places that have the most suffering, Haiti, for example, is 89% Christian, right? the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. And of course, there's still wonderful things happening in Haiti. There's wonderful people in Haiti. My old roommate was from Haiti. But, just kind of comparing which countries have more suffering, Haiti has more suffering than South Dakota. Let's look at some a really brilliant atheist, Stephen Hawking, one of the most brilliant people to ever live. I'll put him up there with Albert Einstein, Isaac Newton. Something that scares Stephen Hawking. The terror that stalks my mind is that we have arrived on the scene because of evolution, because of naturalistic selection. And natural selection assumes natural rejection, which means we have arrived here because of our aggression. It almost dooms us to World War III. If we are the product of violence, how do we get out of it? And now we have nukes. We never had nukes before. Now, and a lot of people have nukes, including North Korea, right? Our idea of justice came from Jesus and the Bible. This idea did not come from describing how things are, but how things should be. And that is a strength of Christianity. Not just describing why is there suffering in the world. Of course, we have the great controversy. But I would say one of the greatest things Christianity has is it has hope, and it describes the ideal how things should be. We should have justice. We should have fairness. Little babies shouldn't die of horrible diseases, And the best way to get rid of injustice in the world is to get rid of God. Because when there is no God, there is no standard for justice. You have my justice, your justice, Nazi justice, ISIS justice, majority justice. We like the Greeks, they started democracy. Yeah, Greeks were not about justice, right? Democracy is not automatically justice. So the Greeks would conquer another city and say, hey, let's take a vote. Let's have democracy. What should we do? We've conquered the city. What should we do? Hey, I think we should kill all the men, rape all the women, and take all the children as slaves. All in favor? Favor. And then they went and did that, right? Democracy is not equal justice. Clan justice, nature's justice, street justice, rich justice and power justice. And yes, of course, we have some of this. People with more money and have more influence. But we have worked very hard as Western society to compensate for that. And this is where everybody wants to move. Again, not perfect. My country's not perfect. Your country isn't perfect. Where do people want to move to? They want to move here, right? And why? Because informed by the Bible, we've created, I would argue, the most just societies. Not perfect, but better than we've had in history. Who wants to go back 500 years? Ladies, you want to go back then? I don't, right? And I would be in the power group, but it was land-owning men, right? It started off like only the kings had power or a chance, and then it was like rich men, then it was the poor men, then it was like all white men, right? And then we brought in other colors of skin, and then we brought the women up, and we're doing pretty good. Not perfect. We're doing better than we have done in history. If you genuinely care about justice, you should want Christianity to be true. The best source we have for justice is the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament. Show me a better source. I read Communist Manifesto. No bueno. Right? Karl Marx, 2 thumbs down, not cool. Okay? And every time we try that version of justice without God, it's mass murder of millions. Right? I have Mein Kampf, too big of a book. Haven't read it yet. Not a good version for justice. Right? That's Hitler's masterpiece, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Right? No good. Where's a better source for justice than Jesus? Right? And what's been really neat is watching some of these famous atheists like Richard Dawkins come around. Richard Dawkins participated in a study where they had cookies, and they didn't want people to steal the cookies. And just, the wall was just blank, people stole the cookies. They put a picture of eyeballs, like a face looking at you, said, don't steal cookies, right? So it had the sign, don't steal the cookies, had the cookies. Less people stole the cookies with the eyeballs looking down on you. And so he still doesn't believe in God. He's like, well, at least the belief in God can help people be better. And it's true, right? If you think there's no accountability, you're trying to get away with what you can. Or if you think God sees everything and you will bear count for that, right? You'll pay account for that, you're going to behave better, right? Whether God is real or not, the world is better when people believe in Jesus and follow the teachings of Jesus. Any questions? I know I didn't nail it all. It's funny, I have so many notes on here, I never look at them. I'll look at them ahead of time, and I come up here and it's always like, oh, which details did I forget this time? But I didn't say we didn't forgive them. Well, we were trying to put the Nazis in jail. We're in court of law, and one of their defenses was, you're judging us based on your American laws that you can't kill Jews, essentially. And that was they were following orders. Our law in our country said this, and I was following the orders in my law. I shouldn't go to jail. And we had to appeal to a higher standard to put them in jail.
Well, we also have to work. So people have insurance and they have locks on their houses and doors. Police force. I've yet to find a pastor anywhere that will tell a wife who's repeatedly beaten, just forgive your husband. Go back tonight and forgive him as he beats you, and then do that the next time. There's always some sort of conditional, don't do that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you haven't found a pastor to do that.
So
You guys all hearing him?
So the idea of just thankfully forgiving people when they do terrible things to you, isn't that depreciating on it's might be recorded?
Yeah, and no, and so here we're talking about justice, right? Justice is not just blank forgive people no matter what. We forgive people, so like the Rwandan lady, she forgave the murderer, but he was also repentant, right? And now the other thing is, if he didn't repent, so if you hate the other side that hurt you, and let's say they die, right? So this will happen. Like, for example, a young lady is abused by her uncle, right? Common thing. He never asked for forgiveness. As she holds that anger in, it continues to poison her and harms her physically. She'll have a higher rate of disease, a higher rate of depression, all this stuff. So ideally, well, he shouldn't do it to start with. If he does, he should apologize. The hard thing now is to forgive him. For her benefit, if she goes to a counselor, they will advise her, you need to forgive your uncle. Now, like, let's say he died, so he got away with it, he died, never came to justice. If she doesn't forgive him, she gets hurt worse. Not saying go back and let him abuse you. That's not the same thing. But if she forgives him, she will have dramatically better health outcomes, mental health and physical health. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that seems kind of weird, right?
You did a lot of bad there. It will cost you later, and it did. Perhaps some of them. There were other things where there has to be some sort of penalty. But doesn't it denigrate the work of Christ on the cross to say forget about it?
Yeah, and so it's a good point John's bringing up here. I would just say this: there's justice and mercy, and there's this balance between. There's this dance between the two, which Jesus does a really beautiful job between the two of those. Right. So we talk about David. So David stole Bathsheba. Well, he raped Bathsheba, right? I've preached that sermon wrong before. I thought Bathsheba was immodest where she was on the rooftop, but it was in that culture. You don't go on the rooftop. Women bathe at that time, so the men are not allowed on the rooftop. David was like, I can do whatever I want. He went on the rooftop knowing that was the wrong time, saw Bathsheba. He's in a position of power, so he power raped her, and then she got pregnant. He murdered Uriah, and then married Bathsheba like he was a hero, like Ruth and Boaz. You know how Boaz saved Ruth by marrying her? So David did a Boaz to marry, the poor widow of his fallen Navy SEAL, right? And he married her, and then he's a hero. Of course, God didn't appreciate that very much and confronted him. And then in Psalms 51, this is verse where it says, against you only have I sinned. And so John read that, and kind of like, you didn't just sin against God. You murdered Uriah and raped Bathsheba. Like, not cool, right? And so with some of those things, we have to use kind of like if I come home and I got a really bad grade on a test when I was in school. I said, "Oh, my mom's going to kill me." Your mom's not going to actually kill you. It's a figure of speech, right? And so sometimes in the Bible there'll be this one verse seems kind of weird, as we have to have a little bit of flexibility. That first of all, this is poetry, and this is saying that really, God, this was your child I murdered, and this was your child that I raped, and it was you. I mean, I deceived the whole nation. I got away with it, right? And so this is David lamenting, right? And one thing I'll say here, in the Bible, I don't want to diminish the Bible at all. With the Bible, sometimes the Bible is prescriptive, how we should do 10 commandments: don't murder, don't steal. Sometimes the Bible is descriptive. You with me? So Judges should not be imitated. You read the book of Judges, there's a lot of bad stuff in there, right? That's a description, not a prescription, right? And so here, this is how David wrote, right? And so part of that is he's being poetic, and yes, he did harm others as well, for sure. And so we want to be, a little bit flexible with that. Well, it's poetry, and David here is sharing his soul, and he's lamenting and repenting to God. Of course, Uriah is dead, right? And as we look at the story, right? So some books are historical, some books are poetic. So Psalms is poetic. First, Second Kings, First, Second Samuel is historical. We look over there, and I love comparing the poem with the story. You know what I mean? And that kind of helps me make sense of it. But yeah, with that, it's poem. It's David is lamenting before God, repenting, etc. And so I would say, don't worry too much where he says, against only God I've sinned. A little bit of that's kind of like a figure of speech. Like if I get an F in my chemistry class, my mom's going to kill me. She's not going to kill you, right? Yes.
So he had to live with that. Then David was weak, and we are weak. God is strong. So the rest of it, David had there were consequences. David basically said, "Oh, we should kill that guy." That didn't happen. Consequences still carried on. So where did David go from there? Well known in the Bible. Just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Take that again. Even, say this diplomatic. Even when you do wrong and you don't know you did wrong, comes back around and looks you in the eye. You are going to notice yourself, if you believe in God, that I did wrong. Because we're all sinners. And that's why Jesus died. And that's the same thing. You go back to David. Where is David today? He's in the ground. In the end times, he's going to be up. He's going to be there with you and me and everybody. And we're going to go, David, why did you do that? You won't be able to ask that question. You might go to the end.
Always going to be kind of weird having David and Uriah there at the same time. There's some awkward conversations. Like, hey, Uriah, and that's why we need grace. Like how is David and Uriah going to be in heaven and still be heaven? If I was Uriah, I'd be ripped off. I'd be like, hey, how's it going, buddy? Right? One of the beautiful things in that story is Bathsheba is one of the ancestors of Jesus, explicitly mentioned in the New Testament, right? Where you usually mention the men, like this guy's the son of son, and it's Rahab, Ruth, Tamar, and Bathsheba. That Jesus is a great grandson of David's horrible mistake and power move and just wrong in so many ways, And yeah, he paid a dear price for that. Also, though, he didn't really forgive himself because when his kids messed up, right? Like with no, before Absalom. The reason why Absalom attacked him. Amnon, thank you. And Amnon raped his half-sister, David didn't deal with it. And that's why Absalom was so mad, right? And the thing is, David messed up, and then he felt guilt and shame, and then he didn't correct his children. And that's where God's grace. Yes, we mess up as parents. We got to forgive ourselves, take God's forgiveness, and we need to get back on duty. Like, God still has a work for us to do, and we need to pick up the pieces and move on and go back to being a good dad, and you still have to set the standard for justice in your family. And David, after that, didn't. I don't want to say he wimped out, but he didn't man up and lead his family properly. Part of that was his guilt and shame, and that snowballed from Amnon over to Absalom, because that was Absalom's sister that got raped by Amnon, and then Absalom avenged that, killed his brother, and then came on the capital, right? So yeah, the Bible is a very amazing book, and there's so much drama and nuance. Like I've been studying the Bible as a pastor and just as a Christian my whole life, and every time I read it, I'm going through Amos right now. There's always stuff I missed last time. I was like, whoa, that's in there. And there's always new. It's like an onion that never ends. There's layer and layer and layer and layer. There's the I'm 12 years old layer, and there's there's the PhD layer, and best book you can study. I mentioned the war in heaven here. Yeah. Who heard me mention the war in heaven? Oh, yeah, no, I mentioned it here in this. The original sin started with Lucifer in heaven. I quoted Revelation. Revelation, war in. Actually, you guys said heaven. All right. Yes, not the first person to ask that question. Uh, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer it. I mean, as we said earlier, to have love, you have to have choice. To have choice, you have to have the possibility of evil. And so, in my mind as a human, right, I'm not the smartest thing in the universe, right? Less smart than God. For me, it just seems like, well, if you know the future, just don't make Lucifer. But then maybe somebody else would have done it. Maybe, the number, instead of, the number 2, maybe the number 3, right? Et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a real easy answer to that. But, the thing is, we don't want to take something like that and get mad at God and then walk away from God because we don't understand that mystery. Where for me, in my experience, one of the fundamental aspects is, does God exist or not exist? Okay, look at the evidence. I highly doubt God does not exist, right, based on evidence. Number 2, the best guidance I have, like with Peter, when Jesus says you have to drink my blood and eat my flesh, and a bunch of disciples took off. They're like, that's weird, and it was weird. They took off, and if I was there, I'd have been like, what is this guy talking about? And they all were like that. And Jesus was like, aren't you guys leaving too? And Peter turned around and said, we have nowhere else to go. You have the words of life. And so, part of my journey is, yeah, I mean, there's that, there's other, where else do I go? I mean, as I look at it, like Jesus does have the words to life. He's real. I think the evidence is much stronger that he exists than he doesn't exist. And life is better with Jesus. And he is the source for justice. And then, am I going to be better, not believing in God? You know what I'm saying? And so, for me, something that's been very important for me has been to accept mystery. Not to be lazy and not study, but to just start off at the outset. I never have all the answers, and I never have all the explanations, right? But do I have enough answers? And, the best source we have is the teachings of Jesus. So much Thomas Jefferson didn't even believe in Jesus, but he wanted the story and the values of Jesus, so he cut out the miracles, right? Even Thomas Jefferson did that. And so for me, it's kind of like I have nowhere else to go. And some things that Jesus says are hard to understand. Now we understand the flesh and the blood, right, was a symbol of the crucifixion, the Lord's Supper. But when they first heard it, it's like, what are you talking about, man? And Peter said, I have nowhere else to go. And so that's what I would say for that. But yeah, good question. Thank you for sharing. Which question? Well, I've done that here. If God is all powerful and God is all good, then why is there evil? Well, it's illogical because evil doesn't exist if God doesn't exist. Well, yeah, there has to be a lawgiver. So then if there is no God, there is no justice. If there is no justice, there is no injustice, right? There's no straight line, etc. So yes, but it's very emotionally difficult for a lot of people. Again, I use the professor in contrast to people in the Holocaust. There were people in the Holocaust stopped believing in God, right? There were people who went in believing in God, either Jews or Christians. They said God can't exist with all this horrible concentration camp stuff going on. There are other ones who shared their food as they were starving to death. They shared their food, and ironically, they would live longer. The ones who gave their food away, and so like right there, you can see that. It's like, I don't have all the answers there, but the teachings of Jesus was still better than the not teachings of Jesus, right? I'd rather be in a concentration camp. I mean, it's easier for me to say now, but we look at it, was like, we respect the guys that gave their food away and shared and refused to be like animals. Where like other times you got in a concentration camp, like the Russians weren't very nice to the Germans. When the Russians started winning World War II, the Germans didn't get a lot of POW status. And so they'd put them, inside a big, barbed wire fence thing. They'd throw potato scraps over the top, and the Germans would go after it, like fighting to the death for potato peelings, for example, right? Which one's better, sharing your food or fighting to the death for scraps? But yeah, there's the emotional appeal in that is very strong in our Western society, and that's why I like to explore it and go through it and process it with people. All right, we want to be wrapping up here in a little bit. One or two more questions. Let's see if right over there in the back. Mm-hmm. Well, there isn't. Everything is just winding down to the cold heat death of the universe. Whole universe will go cold and frozen, absolute zero. So nothing really matters. You might as well have fun, eat, drink, and be merry, right? And so like something like I encourage my brother to like save and invest. Like he's older, he's like, hey, you saving any money? Got any? In Canada we call them mutual funds, 401ks, whatever. Retirement's coming. He's like, well, I could die tomorrow. I was like, but you probably won't. You should save some. So like, I never bought a dirt bike until last year, right? My brother bought it right away, and so he has this. Something I appreciate is he balances me out. I tend to be maybe a little too long-term thinking sometimes. Like, I'll do that later when I'm able to. So like, we want to go to Brazil to visit family, and like there's one time I stalled, I think 3 years. Oh, don't the money, the time, the next year. And I said next year, and then next year. Then my brother, he's like, Mom and I bought tickets. We're going to Brazil. Hope you're coming. Then I manned up and bought my tickets, right? And so something that is positive is he has a focus on now. And I'm hoping, I've shared, I'm hoping I can balance him out a little bit like he balanced me out. Like maybe I'm a little too extreme on the long term, so he balances me a little bit like, hey, take a break, go dirt biking, right? But I also want to kind of influence him like, hey, save for retirement a little bit, a little more long-term thinking, But yeah, for me, I just try, I try and be a blessing, right? That's where I'm at. And I know my brother, he's a bit of, I would say an extreme example. Like I have other friends who aren't Christians that, are a lot more relaxed than he is or whatever. But it's my story, it's my experience, and like I said, I could easily start Friday night with evidence and logic, but I found people like seeing it like the story. How's that lived out? And then under that umbrella, we hit the other stuff. Did that answer your question at all? Okay. All right, last question of the night from a young person. Turn to the camera. It's not even on. We're just pretending. All right, I'll turn his back over here. Whoa, close up. Seeing my follicles. Any questions from the young people? Yeah, no pressure. I'm just like right in front of you staring at you. Yes? Mm-hmm. Oh, flooded. And there's the kids at summer camp in Texas. Yes. Yeah, they're at Bible camp. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, I think, going back to the story of Job, I think Job's friends did a lot better job when they didn't tell Job anything. The ministry of presence, they just hung out and suffered with him. And I've heard, friends who've had a miscarriage, for example, they don't want to tell people. So when my wife and I, when we got pregnant, we didn't tell anyone until we saw a heartbeat. Not that we, not that we didn't trust anybody. Is I just didn't want the drama. Oh, what happened? Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want to hear that like 1,000 times. When people mean well, I just don't want to deal with that, right? And so we have 4 beautiful, healthy kids. We didn't announce any of our pregnancies until we saw a heartbeat first, right? Because once you see the heartbeat, you have a lot bigger chance of carrying the baby to term. And so, in the story of Job, often the best thing is not say anything at all. Just, show love, ministry of presence, gifts, etc. And mhm. No, so bad. And in my honest answer is I don't have an answer. I know from other things that God is love. We can see that in other evidences, etc. And sometimes, and those examples are often the most compelling examples often involve children, right? We feel bad for the people who've died in Holocaust. Like we don't want to see the adults die either. But when we see the children die, it affects us more. And part of that is just the way we're wired. We are parental, right? We are a caretaking society. We care about young people, right? I've worked with young people, and I've just seen so much generosity of people be generous. They'll donate, to a Christian school or to a summer camp or to get buses to bring kids to church or whatever. I've just seen so much generosity. We really, as humans, we have this strong affection for young people and are especially upset when we see these tragedies, at the summer camp with the drowning or the unborn baby gets umbilical cord wrapped around its neck. I don't have an answer for that. And in Job, God never answered Job. See, yeah. And if I can just finish this thing with Job, I really like the book of Job. When you read, this is where reading Hebrew can help out a little bit. When you learn to read Hebrew in Bible school, you start with the books of Moses. Moses was a genius, but he wrote very simple Hebrew, as the Gospel of John. Gospel of John is very theologically complex, but when we start reading Greek, we start with John, not with Paul, right? Paul is PhD, like, oh my goodness, what's he even saying, right? If you think it's bad in English, Greek is worse, right? And so, with in the Old Testament, The Deuteronomy, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy has this thing called Deuteronomic theology. It's like I give you a choice between life and death. Choose life, right? Your choices affect your future. God will bless you if you choose the right thing, which is true a lot of the time. Job is a correction. So in the New Testament, we have Paul, grace. We have James, faith without works is dead, right? And Paul talks about faith. So they balance each other. And so Job is a balance to Moses. Choose life, make good choices, follow God, be obedient. Job is bad things happen, you don't know why, and sometimes you don't have an answer. Job said, I will argue with God to his face. Why do these horrible things happen to me? When God showed up, he never answered Job. He said, Job, where were you when I made the universe? Right? And then he blessed Job, but he never gave Job an answer to why he suffered. And I think for me, that's kind of like a big boy, a big girl answer, right? Job is a sophisticated, complex book. It's wisdom literature, okay? It's very poetic, it's very deep. And I think in there, number one, the friends ministered by their presence. When they started talking, they made Job angry. So I think there's some truth there. Not always, but there's some truth to that. And number two, Job didn't get an answer. And I think on this side of heaven, I don't think there's a good answer on why those babies died with the umbilical cord. I don't have a good answer why those children at summer camp drowned in Texas last year. But I do know that believing in God is better than not believing in God. We lost our nephew 2 years ago, right? Horrible situation. And, where Paul said, we mourn not as those who don't have hope. So we mourn and we weep and we lament. But in the middle of that mourning, we have a hope of the resurrection. If Jesus rose from the dead, he promised to rise us from the dead. And I believe we're going to see those children again. From summer camp with the umbilical cord around their neck, I'm going to see my nephew again who died in the womb at the hospital. And they couldn't get him out in time. Like, God, right there, And it's firstborn baby. Thankfully, have another beautiful baby and another one on the way, right? So we have the second child, Liv, beautiful little girl, and we have, I think, a little boy on the way. My wife is sending them presents and stuff in the mail. And, but yeah. I think sometimes it's good to just say that is a horrible situation. I don't have a good answer for that. But let's hold on to God like Jacob. We wrestled with the angel, said, I will not let you go till you bless me. And that's what I see Job doing, right? And stuff. Yeah, Job is a great book to read there. Like that's what like childhood faith can handle adult questions. Job is about adult questions. Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 You guys all hear that? I'd say one last point. I was listening to you. One last point I've heard is, we get mad at God when he doesn't do away with evil. When we see, these horrible things happen. And then when God does do away with evil, we get mad at him then, with the flood, right? Well, how can a God have love? Well, it's not the Babylonian epic, because they're like, oh, humans are making noise. Let's kill them all and not tell them. God lamented his creation because all their thoughts were just evil continually. So he destroyed the evil, and people were holding on to the evil, so they had to be destroyed with the evil they wouldn't let go of, essentially, right? And we get mad when there's injustice, and we get mad when God takes away justice. And also with Canaan. Canaan was bad news. One of the big things people don't like, well, how come God called the Israelites, to take out the Canaanites? Well, look what the Canaanites were doing, right? Sodom and Gomorrah. You want that everywhere? No, okay. And we see that with governments too. So there'll be something happening, and as a Canadian, I'll see America, and you guys get in trouble no matter what you do. You know, we're like, hey, look at what's happening in that little country. Look at the horrible injustice. You got to do something about that. Then if you guys don't do anything, we're like, oh, America doesn't care. Then America does something. Oh, look, they bummed those people. And you're like, what do you want, you know? And like, it's easy for us to criticize you guys, right? You know, no country's perfect. We're not perfect. You guys aren't perfect. But when you're the big dog, sometimes also, no matter which way you go, people get mad at you. And God is definitely that way, you know? And yeah, you know, and we do believe in Bible, like all through the Bible, that God is going to put an end to it. Jesus put an end to the power of sin. And then when he comes a second time, he'll put an end to the presence of sin, right? And there is going to be no death and no crime and no cancer and no injustice, right? And in the meantime, we struggle with hope, right? We struggle, we hold on to hope. The best answers we have are found through Jesus, you know, and including his hatred of injustice and tragedy. No one cares about those babies more than God. If Jesus is real, if the God of the Bible exists, his heart is more broken than our hearts are when our own child dies. You know, and as a parent, like, it's different when you're a parent, right? When you have your own kids and you see them, you're like, man, if someone messes with my kids, I'm non-violent till you mess with my kids. You know what I mean? And you know, and you're just like, how would I feel if someone did something horrible to my kids? And whatever anger I would have, God has more, you know. And on the other side, though, I mean, God holds back. He lets things play out sometimes, like letting Saul go, King Saul. Like he was so humble, he hid and went to crown him, and then like he's trying to kill David for how many years, right? And I believe God tried his best to save Saul, and God Saul ended up dying in battle, right? And I don't believe Saul is going to be saved. But how does God feel about that? You know, and it should have been Jonathan. You know, Jonathan's supposed to be the next king, not David. You know, yeah. Good questions. I think it's time to wrap up. All right. Thank you for your questions. I guess in summary, I would say don't be scared of your questions. Don't suppress them, but also ask the questions, do your research, and also know that nobody has all the answers, you know. But the best answers are found in Jesus. And Santa Claus is real. Let's have closing prayer. Pastor Nathan, can I bring you up here? I got to have all the other prayers. Prayer is a privilege, a free long distance phone call. Get the orange one here. And you guys have a wonderful pastor here. I've known him for many years. He is a faithful and godly man. Pretty cool wife, too. I know you guys are very blessed. And, it's been awesome to be here. Could you close us up with prayer?
Let's bow our heads. Gracious Father in heaven, I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet together and to talk about eternal and spiritual. Have to be able to participate with others and be that we have, just like we are called to do, to be ready to give an answer. Family, as they